make my way to the washroom before there's a lineup.
Florence James, Penelakut elder, and Rose Longini, a Galiano elder, are going to open our time with prayer.
I welcome you here to this sacred place where we met with Ken, and I'm going to say the words in Coast Salish language, the way I always do to greet the morning. And for our, I have holding in my hand, representing our good friend who became a spirit being. And from then on, the cedar will represent his spirit being. Hajbati Tsima Tanequayo, Ihomit Ewatal for Tanequayo, 8 Max Quayats. Isal Panawat Link Tal Kotish Dates Tanequayo, Swimat Kunit was Tam Talk, Hajba Ken Millard. Translating. Thank you, dear Creator, for being here on this day. We ask you to please help us today in all our days. We ask for special guidance in the way things will be today in honor of our dear friend Ken Millard. And we just ask for special blessing upon this sacred land that he built with his own hands. And very dear and hard-working man to keep the earth perfect and clean as to what we use it for. Thank you all. Thank you all.
A contemplation of a traditional memorial prayer based on Psalm 90. Like the grasses of the field, in the morning we grow and flourish, and in the evening we wither and are cut down. But the recognition of how brief our lives are can bring us wisdom. We can gratefully receive the miraculous gifts of each day. And we can remember the noble people of all times who lived and died for justice and compassion. Ken Millard will live forever in our hearts and will continue to nourish the love and enthusiasm that he inspired in all of us. Amen.
So Ken, I've worked with him for 26 years on the board of the Conservancy. My name is Loren Wilkinson. Meredith and I have been large neighbors to the south since 1988. But I'm going to leave most of those Galiano and personal reflections to others. There are lots of those. I want to try to give you, with the help, a lot of help from Ken's family and other friends, a very quick picture of some of the parts of Ken's very full life before Galiano. Ken was born in Maryland in 1941. He died, as we all know, peacefully here on Galiano 2 weeks ago today, lying on the sofa after supper, after a day of cutting firewood. he left us right at the climax of a spectacular lunar eclipse, when the moon was in the shadow of the earth, red with the light of all of the earth's sunrises and sunsets simultaneously. The blood moon, newspapers called it. I mention that detail for two reasons. First, it's hard not to see some symbolism in that planet-sized shadow, which changed the moon's color. Ken's impact was very large. And second, Ken would have been tickled by the very physics of the eclipse, and would have been happy to explain to anyone who asked, with diagrams if necessary, what was going on. His first profession was as a university physics teacher, and one student from that time described him as her best professor, with a real gift for explaining complex physics. He leaves behind his wife, Linda, they were married for 55 years. Many of us could hardly say Ken without saying Ken and Linda. His daughters, Beth and Lisa, his older brother, they're all over here, John, and younger sister Doris. And all of them are here today with some of their other family members. Ken had a complex life. Many of us know that Ken had 3 careers, in each of which he did very important work. First of all, he was a physics scholar and professor, a scientist. He came to Canada in 1972 with his family in order to teach physics at Simon Fraser University. He'd been offered jobs at universities in Montreal and Australia. Ken's doctoral research at Case Western Reserve in Ohio was supported by both the Atomic Energy Commission and the National Science Foundation. His doctoral dissertation, you can look at it there in the building. Is it in the building? Did you bring it? I encourage you to take a look. You won't want to look much longer than that at the dissertation. Just scan a page or two. It was titled An Exact Solution to the Classical Anisotropic Seisenberg Model with Long-Range Cap Interactions. Now that seems a long way from conservation on Galiano. But it's not as far as you might think. I looked up the word anisotropic and found that it describes an object that has different properties when measured in different directions. The example given in the online dictionary was the nature of wood, which is stronger along the grain than across it. And as the name Heisenberg suggests, his work was in the realm of quantum mechanics, which deals in part with the way the world seems to be changed by our interaction with it. I'll come back to that. Ken was increasingly involved in music, especially Baroque music, which has been described as mathematics you can listen to. After a few years at Simon Fraser, he decided to become an instrument maker and moved with his family to Salt Lake City in a violin making school there. He was 5 years older than the maximum age of 30 when he did that, but they let him in anyway. I talked recently to a friend of his, Guy Reboot, who's now a violin maker in New York City, who said that Ken really had 4 careers. He did make a few very fine instruments, but he quickly became fascinated with bows, especially the bows of older instruments. And he became, instruments of an older period, and became a bow maker, which Guy says is really an entirely different skill. Really 2 careers. Very few people make both instruments and bows. He moved back to Vancouver after the school in Salt Lake City and spent the next several years making bows, for stringed instruments, mainly for very prominent musicians, many for prominent musicians. A Millard bow is still sought after. I've heard him described as the best, by an expert violinist, as the best maker of Baroque violin bows in the world. You can see some of those bows inside there, and one of them is being played by Unruh, Pat Unruh, before, and she'll be in there talking a bit about them, or perhaps up here afterwards to explain a bit more about those bows and what's so special about them. He let slip once that probably none of his bows would sell for less than $10,000. These are very fine instruments. he became a kind of leader of the early music society in Vancouver. Hence his friendship with Rose Longini, who was playing the harpsichord, and we'll play it again. It was that music that brought him to Galiano in the first place. He came here to perform at a concert. He loved the place. Ken and Linda bought property shortly after to the north, camped there for a while, then built a cottage and a shop and moved here permanently in the late 80s. Two things happened around that time. The wood in Ken's bows is heavy tropical wood. He would have logs sent from places like Guyana and dry it and saw them up, work it. But he developed a very serious allergic reaction to woods. And after several years of struggling with that, it was really life-threatening. He had to abandon bow making entirely. At about the same time, Macmillan Brodell, and you know the rest of the story, that was the context in which Ken founded the Galiano Conservancy, on whose land, of course, we're meeting. He and Linda, as we all know, have worked full-time without pay for over 25 years, making the Conservancy a model, a leader of land trusts in Canada, in the world. That story is more familiar to most of us, and you'll hear more about it. These 3 or 4 careers seem very different, but at least 2 things hold them together, unite them. One is simply the character and quality of Ken's work, which has always been precise, careful, determined, and coming as close as possible to perfection. I'm frustrated if it's not there. Whether in physics or bow making or understanding the complexities of Galiano land use and politics. Guy Rabout, who I talked to when I talked to him recently in New York, who they were in the violin school together, said, whatever Ken did, he would research it, figure it out, do it, and become an expert. And he added, when Ken and Linda decided to do something, and he added Linda, who's very much with us still, nothing could stop them. The second thing I think that holds Ken's 3 or 4 careers together is a little more subtle, and it's perhaps hinted at in the name Heisenberg and that concept of anisotropy, both of which reflect the way our perception of things actually changes the world. In all of his careers, Ken has demonstrated beautifully what is unique about being human. We human beings are capable of three things which are really unique from anything else in nature. We do not merely use our skills to consume nature, as do other living things. We need to do that, of course, and we've learned to do it very well. We also engage with nature in 3 ways that are really uniquely human, uniquely different. They have no benefit other than delight. The first way is science. Knowledge of how things work, just for the sake of the knowledge. The second is art. Sheer delight in the sounds and textures and shapes of the world. And it's obvious that Ken excelled in those things. For the third way, I have no better word than worship. It's a word which, in its basic sense, doesn't have anything to do with religion. It means literally worthship. The ability to recognize, appreciate, delight in the worth of something. Not for what it can give us, but for what it is in itself. In science and music, and especially in his work on Galiano, Ken was a kind of genius at seeing the worth of things and helping others see that worth. We and the world are richer because of his life. Now, before listening to some of your recollections, we're going to hear from 2 of Ken's musical friends. Rose Longini I've already introduced on the harpsichord, and Guy Rabout, by the way, called her the fairy godmother of early music in Vancouver in the 80s. And Esther Ruth Teal, a young musician from Victoria, who became friends with Ken last year when she cooked during the project that dismantled that building and moved it down from the Kootenays. She describes Ken helping her wash dishes and demonstrating Baroque bowling with a broom.